This statement really undersells just how valuable data breaches are in terms of being a source of reconnaissance data for social engineers. Let me tell you a little bit about how I know that. I run this service, Have I Been Pwned? And it's a service that allows people to search through publicly exposed data breaches in order to access the exposure of their personal information. At the time of recording, I have more than 250 million accounts that have been leaked online and are in the hands of both attackers and the general public. Things like 152 million accounts from Adobe, leaked in 2013. These are huge volumes of data, often of a very sensitive nature, and often from multiple sources for the one individual. Let me give you a bit of an example of what I mean by that. Let's imagine we have an individual. Let's talk about some of the data breaches which have made their way out of systems and into the hands of attackers and frequently into the hands of the general public. And by that I mean anyone with an internet connection who can download these breaches that are usually pretty easily discoverable. So for example, a large software company that had plain text password hints. The passwords themselves were encrypted, but the hints were in plain text, and they gave you a very, very good idea of what the passwords themselves were. Or how about a dating site that has quite personal attributes? Now you may not think of these as sensitive, but they're attributes which could be very useful for identity theft. And again, we'll talk more about that later on in the course. Plain text passwords is a problem that still plagues us. And certainly I have many courses on Pluralsight that teach you about how to create passwords securely as software developers. But we have this problem. There are many, many breaches out there that have passwords in plain text that people have almost certainly reused in other locations. Another one again, a toy maker that has home addresses and phone numbers in their data breach. Now have a think about how you can start tying all of these personal attributes together and creating very rich profiles of people. And it's not necessarily that one individual is in all these data breaches, but very frequently one individual is in multiple data breaches that have exposed different personal attributes, and you can start tying them all together. A gambling site with IP addresses and full names. So once you have an IP address, you have another piece of data that identifies where the individual lives, plus you know who their internet service provider is. And that's a piece of information that can be used by the social engineer. And one final example, a breached social engineering site. So a site that was actually designed to teach people about social engineering and also disclosed private messages. Now clearly, when two people believe they're having a private conversation, they're going to express things that they probably don't want to be public. Things that can tell you quite a lot about those individuals. And there are many, many examples of data breaches exposing these private discussions between two people who quite reasonably thought that the discussion would remain private. So that's just one more source of reconnaissance and open source intelligence. Let's now move on and summarize the module.